To assess the number of refugees and their immediate family members willing to repatriate to the territory in order to participate in the referendum of self-determination and to determine their final destination within the territory. In the course of this exercise, UNCHR pre-registered some 126,000 Sahrawis in the Tindouf area. However, there were concerns expressed by UNFICR headquarters at the time the exercise was undertaken. These concerns referred to the fact that there were no safeguards in place to avoid double registration.
This show would have to be about 3 hours long to get to the bottom of the referendum issues and who says what and how many there are. But one of the things that does seem clear is that no one can agree on the numbers, and no one can really agree on the way to establish what the numbers are. I mean, the James Baker plan, the former American Secretary of State, tried to have a go. The United Nations embraced it, and then it all ran into the sand. I mean, do you think, Roger, there's the slightest hope of the UN getting to the bottom of who are the refugees, who's entitled to have a say on the future determination? Or is that a false hope, do you think?
I would have said it's a false hope unless the surrounding countries give their full support to the UN agencies.
Yeah.
Without that, they are operating only from what is agreed elsewhere, and they can never get to the bottom of a refugee problem without that support. And there are many examples of this sort of thing going on elsewhere.
It has to be said, Stefan, not just through this book, but when you look at the issue, I mean, the Algerians haven't always been playing with a straight bat, as we English would say, in this issue. And so it's not all a one-sided problem with Morocco. This counting of heads, the Polisario and the Algerians seem a bit loath to let the United Nations do an independently audited count.
Well, as you say, it does become a very political issue, you know, and the Algerians are nervous about preconditions. I think having with the Baker plan, I think that was the Baker one in 2000. They registered 200,000 people who they felt were eligible to vote. The MINURSO,
But that was done with just heads of households and no check. So it was just me turning up and saying I've got 20 children, and whether I've got 15 or 30, who knows who checks.
There were concerns,
yeah.
and the Moroccans raised 130,000 concerns. So
yeah.
I mean, obviously in those circumstances, you can't carry on with the referendum. But
so I think the Red Cross, they sought about 90,000, didn't they? So I mean, the figures are, it's all pick a figure almost.
It is, and this does need to be resolved. And I think this is the need to sit around a table, both sides, without preconditions. Because at the moment, the King of Morocco talks about not one grain of sand that he will relinquish, and the Polisario aren't prepared to discuss anything which doesn't include the possibility of independence and self-determination. So you've got these two sides, and you've got the United Nations who've ruled on this, as I say, over 100 times, who aren't willing to enforce anything. So
meanwhile, you've got the refugee camps which you've been... Have you visited the camps, Roger? I don't know. I've not. You don't see many reports about them. No. But presumably the conditions, given where they're based, are pretty awful, pretty hot, not great facilities, obviously very poor. These Tindouf camps, they're based in Algeria, and you've actually seen them?
Yes, I've spent...
And is the condition as horrible as we'd imagine it to be?
Yeah, the one I've spent most time in is Dakhla, which is the most remote. It's 175 kilometres from the nearest town, and there's nothing there. There's nowhere to graze animals. There's no sources of water, no sources of food. So everything has to be brought in by United Nations agencies. Having said that, the United Nations agencies have been doing quite a good job in making sure that people's basic needs are fulfilled. But I think there's something about being a refugee for 35 years and the lack of hope and the lack of amount of despondency that causes among a population, that's a terrible thing. And I think the world does need to focus on this and find some way of resolving it. And
but I think
also
one of the problems, Roger's interesting, is the movement of the refugees, because there was a report to the United Nations Senate, undertaken obviously by Americans, and there's been a United Nations refugees report as well, saying that one of the problems they have in the camps is if a family wants to leave the camp for whatever reason, if they want to go into Morocco, a member of the family has to stay behind. In other words, to make sure they come back. So one gets the impression as an outsider that maybe the Polisario is keeping a bit of a sort of strong control over this, whereas if you have a good argument, should you really need such a strong control? We're back to the old Soviet perceptions of not about keeping people out, it's about keeping your people in.
That's right, and the book makes that quite clear.
Yeah.
And it's also very useful because it shows how Algeria has supported the Polisario leaders and given them therefore some status, and therefore they've been able to do all sorts of things that most refugees can't do in the wider world because the Algerians have supported them over such a long period of time. And that's what was new from when I first came across the issue.
And might Algeria's position change a bit, because that's now trying to open up a bit. And the way Libya's changed its relationship with other countries, it seems to be that Algeria is going down that route as well. Do you think? So might the Polisario find a less welcoming home there, or is it too wedded into Algerian foreign policy? Do you think?
Again, I'm probably not the best person to comment on Algerian foreign policy, but
yeah.
I think the Algerians have.
But I mean, they've been the paymasters, haven't they? They've contributed the money.
They've given a refuge for these people who, without which they wouldn't be there. But definitely in terms of I was going to say in terms of geopolitics, it's Western Sahara is becoming more important with the rise of terrorism in the Maghreb. There's the concerns with Obama's talk of his new beginning with the Islamic world.
Yeah.
He wants to resolve this. He wants to resolve it also in accordance with international law. So I think he's put some pressure on the Moroccans. It was a bit disappointing with the latest report by the new UN commissioner there, where he didn't come out very strongly. So
there's going to be a bit of pressure on everybody, really, isn't there? Moroccans, Algerians, the Polisario. But at least if the issue is being talked about, then hopefully for the problems with the refugee camps, there might be a bit of hope, but obviously a long journey yet. Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Dr. Ali Bahajib's book is a distinguished, detailed work, admittedly, from Morocco's perspective, but a thorough guide to the issue. We were never going to resolve a 35-year-long dispute on our Gentle Book Show, but I hope this review has given you a desire to learn more about this fascinating part of Africa and an understanding of the challenges the numerous tribes of that desert region face. I'd like to thank Stefan and Roger for joining us, and we want you to get in touch with us. Here's a quick video telling you how to.
The Epilogue team want you to continue with your book review suggestions. You can email us at epilogue@presstv.co.uk, and don't forget to join our Facebook page. Enter Epilogue on Press TV into the search bar. You can watch past episodes, extended interviews, leave comments and take part in discussions with other Epilogue fans.
Until next time, thanks for watching.